Welcome to my pandemic blog. I wanted to share with you how to create your own pole dancing crash mat. I looked high and low all over the internet. I wasn't able to find one that was inexpensive. Most of them were anywhere from $200 to $400, and the cheap ones that were $100 were 2 inches. So I created my own tutorial, as you can see, and it ended up costing me about roughly $125 to make. To create this mat, you'll need the foam, which was $85. Fabric, you can use less than 4 yards, 4 zippers, and Velcro that's 2 inches wide. Since I wanted a round mat and not a square one, but I didn't want to waste all the foam, I ended up compromising and just making the corners round. And I did that on the computer. I just figured out what the dimensions of the overall foam was going to be, and then I kind of rounded off the edges. So I purchased an electric knife off of Amazon for about $10, and it wasn't that easy to cut with this. I thought it was going to be a lot easier. I guess it was better than just using a regular knife. It came out okay, except for one of the corners, I kind of cut it at an angle. So what I did was I got my pattern piece and I laid it on the foam and I traced it out with a Sharpie, and I did the same thing with the center piece. So once you've measured your foam pieces and you traced off all the sections that, or however you want it to look, then you can start cutting it. This is my not too neat of a cutting job, but it's going to be covered, no one's going to see it. The centerpiece was a whole lot easier to cut. I thought that was going to be tougher than the actual corners, but it actually wasn't. So this is what it looks like after I cut the center and the corners. I did that twice, and then I put it on the pole. So I made sure that it fit around the pole. Now, if my circle wasn't big enough, this would have been the time where I would have carved out more. If you cut too much, you can't go back. So once I've established that was okay, I decided to cut my fabric pieces, and I laid out all my pattern pieces before to make sure that I wasn't wasting any fabric. And all the straight lines, I butted them up against each other, so I only had to cut one straight line instead of two. What you want to do first is attach the Velcro. So sew the Velcro to the Velcro pieces, which is the inner side wall. This is how your mat is going to stay together. I sewed it along the edge of the Velcro pieces. I had to do this 4 times. One foam piece had the loop of the Velcro, and then on the other one had the hooks. So once you have that sewn, you can start sewing the rest of the crash mat. The way this goes is you have the 2 Velcro pieces and the center piece, which is the circular piece where it's going to go around the pole. So this is a straight piece, but when you sew it to the top and the bottom of the piece, it's going to be curved. So this fabric that I'm using is like a PVC coating on top of a polyester. So I don't want to put a lot of pins on it. It's almost like working with leather or clear PVC. I created all my pattern pieces with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. What I did to these pieces was I pressed the seam allowance inwards and then I top stitched it. And then I'm going to sew this to one of the top or bottom pieces. Beginning is simple, it's just a straight stitch, 1/2 inch seam allowance, but then you get to the curve, which gets a little tricky. I notched the center of the curve and the center of the piece that I'm sewing it to. It's a lot easier to sew it. So once it's done, I had to clip it to go around the curve, and also when I turn it inside out. And if you wanted to, you can clip the corners a bit. Well, you have to clip one of the corners, but you can trim it down. So when you're turning it inside out, it's a lot easier to get a nice sharp corner there. So you can already see it take shape. What I want to do is attach it to the other bottom piece. And you're doing the same thing. You're going to sew 1/2 inch seam allowance around the curve, and then you're going to clip it. It's optional if you want to top stitch it to secure it to make it a little bit more durable. The quickest and easiest way that I came up with finishing this mat was to put zippers in it. I used invisible zippers, although I wanted to use regular ones, but this is what I had on hand. I used 2 zippers for each mat section. When you're sewing the zipper, make sure that the zipper tops meet end pieces are opposite each other. So I had a pretty big gap there. I would have liked to have no gap or very little, but I was kind of concerned that I wasn't going to be able to stuff the foam inside the casing. My pattern pieces have notches. The notches are there just to line up all the pieces, and I want to make sure that the zippers are lined up at the same spot. Marking one side so you guys can see, and then I'm marking the other side for my own reference. So you don't need hundreds of notches, you just need a few. Here you see me pinning the sidewall to the zipper. I'll be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so the tape, since it's not a 1/2 inch, I'm gonna have to eyeball it when I'm sewing it. So since I'm sewing a straight piece onto a curve, what you need to do is clip the corners where it goes around the curve, because when you turn it inside out, it needs some room or else it's going to pucker. Trim away all the loose threads that you see, and also the corners. You can trim them down if you wanted to, a little bit, not all the way. So here I'm just showing you how I'm zipping it up after I've stuffed the foam inside. So this is the little gap I was telling you about. I wish I would have butted them up a little bit closer together, but it worked out fine. So here's half of the crash mat. You can see the Velcro on it, and then that's me attaching the second piece. And I've tested it out. It works perfectly. I'm totally in love with it. I'd also like to see what you guys come up with, so send me some pictures or a link. Also, let me know if you guys want to see any more tutorials like this. If you like, please subscribe, and see you next time. Bye!